Live. There you go, Sherry. Click play. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Bay Live. We're here today to discuss the Monty Python and the Holy Grail. We hope everybody's getting in, and we're seeing some people logging in right now. So we appreciate it very much, and thank you for coming in today. Tonight, with Monty Python and the Holy Grail, we have three distinguished panelists. We have Zeke Smith, Ted Kroll, and Rita Wessels. Let's first take a look and just and talk about and introduce Zeke Smith. Zeke. Zeke is a projectionist at the Bay Community Theater. He went to school and completed multiple film courses and seminars, as well as competing in state and national competitions for TV and cinema. He has always had an interest in owning his theater, and working here has been a pleasure. And we want to thank you very much, Zeke, for being here today and helping us with this show. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Always happy to be here.
Thank you. Ted Kroll. Well, Ted, he's a Washington, D.C. nationalist, very native, Washington, D.C. native. He started as an usher at a local theater, went on to teach a film course at Trinity College, and helped establish a movie theater. Over the years, he's collected over 3,000 films, almost the entire history of cinema in his closet, and he's teamed up with the programming committee at the Bay Theater, and he's a good volunteer and a good expert. We're very welcome to have you today, so thank you very much, Ted. Next is Rita Wessels. Thank you, Ted. Next is Rita Wessels. Rita Wessels started her interest in films watching years ago, if you all remember that, pre-cable TV days, watching movies on Friday night in the local PBS station. And then in high school, her very first job was at the movies, and she continued on through high school and in college to work at the theaters, doing all the jobs from vendette to usher to cashier and assistant manager. And she always enjoyed researching all the films so she could help the customers out. She went on to become a teacher in the Milwaukee Public School System, and she retired from there a couple years ago, where she taught at the Milwaukee German Immersion School for 33 years. And she's an active member on the Bay Community Theater's programming team. We thank you again for being here today very much, Rita.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Well, it's very good to see all of you. And with everybody here today, I would like to first get things started a little bit here with asking a question of each of you is, why is this film significant to remaining a part of film history? And Zeke, we'll let you start with this to begin.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, first of all, it's probably going to remain a part of film history for years and years to come, because it is still the #1 British film in the US. So lots of influence from that, as well as I think that there's a certain niche for films that really don't take themselves too seriously, aren't really trying to really send a really dramatic message or anything, something that you can just really laugh at and enjoy. And I think that since there aren't very many movies like it, that it's special and it's going to be around for a very long time.
Oh, good. Ted, what do you think? Why is this film going to remain significant in film history?
Well, I'm not so sure it will. No, and I say that kind of a goofy way. I mean, it's the one Monty Python movie that has got the best reputation, and Monty Python is known as part of our cultural landscape. You know, as Zeke said, they're the Beatles of British humor and all that. So this is the way to, even though the characters aren't very recognizable. What got me about the film, and I saw it only on DVD, so I don't know what it was like in the theater, but there are all these goofy things as far as the projection of the film. You know, like the wrong reel came in, or the titles are wrong, or as it goes on at the end, the end kind of breaks off, and you get to see the film, the film leader and all that kind of thing. And so what that makes that significant is that audiences today don't have that experience. They haven't been in a movie where the wrong reel was put in the wrong order, or the film got caught in the gate and it burned up the frame and all that kind of thing. Those are all things of the past, and they play a lot of neat, goofy things in the movie about that. So in a way, it's a way of remembering the way movies used to be shown in the good old days.
Well, thank you, Ted. Let's hear from Rita then. Why do you think this film will remain significant?
Well, I think this film will stay in people's minds because of the humor, because we always need humor to lighten the conditions of the world. And I think because the Monty Python group does such a good job of being a troupe, being an ensemble. And there are 3 main films that they have, and the Holy Grail, The Life of Brian, and I always forget the third one. Just shows that experienced troupe working together over and over again. And I think that's a unique aspect to this film as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rita. Thank you very much. So as we go on now, for everybody out there in our audience, if you pay attention to your screen, on it is going to be a chat session. It's either going to be down below or be on one of the sides someplace. And in that chat, you can connect up with everybody else, because I do see out there Marilee's being saying hi to everybody. Sheila's here. And we appreciate that very much, and commenting and joining in. That's a lot of fun. We like reading what the comments are and people are talking about. But we would also like you to do is post questions. So we do have somebody monitoring, and we'll post questions for this period, this session. And if you could, please post questions so that we can, or comments that we can use to develop a discussion. That would work out very well. So thank you very much. But we do have questions that we got from beforehand, from people that communicated with us beforehand about questions about the film. And in the first question we're going to start with today for the panelists is, there's a continuous flow of skits throughout the whole movie. It's either physical skits, sight gags, and other comedic elements. But there's also intellectual banter or comedy or smart humor, whatever you want to say it, where there's this bantering back and forth that's comedic just to watch this banter. And each of you, what are some of the examples of this balance in the film? What is something that's a sight gag versus like something that was an intellectual one? Let's start with Zeke on this one. Okay.
Yeah. One of the first ones that you're going to notice is the confrontation with the first castle they run into, where it brings up the topic of where they got the coconuts and how the coconuts even got there. And the physical comedy of it is just using the coconuts to simulate the trotting of a horse. And when I first saw it, I thought it was hilarious. But then the rest of the knights and everything point out, how did he get them? It turns into a whole conversation of the airspeed velocity of a swallow and how a 5-ounce swallow could carry a 1-pound coconut. And you get the physical comedy of, yeah, we can't afford horses, so we'll just call up these coconuts together, with the practicality and the physics, and everything after that is just this back and forth that I think, leading back to the fact that they're a comedy trope, is after years of doing comedy together, you get that sort of chemistry where you can bounce off each other. And I think that really sells the fast intellectual comedy of it.
Okay. Let's go to Ted next on that one. Ted, what do you have to say about that?
The other part of that is that that's a running joke through the whole movie about the pigeon. I mean, there's a little pigeon with a coconut on it that just is shown off in the corner there. It isn't even mentioned later in the movie. I think it's when the witch is being interrogated, something like that. And then one of the 5 questions, when they go over the bridge. Oh, I'm sorry, the 3 questions going over the bridge had to do with the air velocity and that kind of thing. And I just gave away one of the jokes there with the 5 questions. But the other one is when they bump into the peasants, and he's a very disagreeable dentist, I think he is, and he gets into this whole class struggle thing, Marxist analysis and all that. And I'm not sure how well that would go over in America, but I know anybody in England who would, or somebody had been in college would know what that whole riff is about. How did you get to be the king, and did you get elected, and all that kind of thing. And I find that kind of thing kind of intriguing and amusing. I gotta admit, I don't like they just try everything. I mean, they just throw it on the wall and see if it sticks. And that's always been the way they've done things. And but this one it was very interesting that that whole business about class distinctions and how you get elected and all this kind of thing was pretty amusing.
Yeah, and there was some kind of. And I've been wondering. The one person describes they have a community or a common or something like that. And it's a long word. I don't even think that's a real word.
I think they described it as a autocratic commonwealth, or not something along those lines. But yeah, it was really funny.
Yeah. So Rita, you want to comment? Because I know I saw your hand raised just about this. Is that a real word?
Well, what they called it is an autonomous collective and an anarcho-syndicalist commune.
Yeah, that's it.
So those are, partially made up words jammed together with real words. And I think that was one of my favorite smart banter scenes too. The other one that comes to mind is when they're looking for shrubbery, they come across Roger the Shrubber, and he talks about the in economic repression at this time, making it very difficult for shrubbers to make a living. And just these little bits and pieces that they stick in here and there that sounds so very, very serious in the middle of this very comedic film.
Very good. So we have something from Merrily, the portrayal of God. It was good. Don't say I'm sorry. I hate that. Do you have any feedback or anything else? Any comments about the portrayal of God in this film, or why it was being used, or how it was being used in this film? Anybody?
Well,
Zeke?
I can imagine that groveling would be annoying after a while too. And I like how it's continuously, they really can't seem to get it right. Like first they're bowing and he's like, that's rude, get up and talk to me. And they're averting their eyes and he's like, look at me in the face when you're talking to me. And religion is a pretty big part of this movie. I mean, the whole plot is searching for the Holy Grail. And the God's portrayal in this, I think, is hilarious because it really, once again, kind of, I mean, I don't want to make a joke or anything, but like everything in this is a joke. So every character can't be taken seriously. And I think that the religious quest that they go on really influences a lot of the art and the animation style, and it's a huge influencer throughout the movie, both plot, story, and character-wise.
Mm-hmm. All right, just as a side to this thing too, is that this movie, when you first heard about it, it was about Camelot, but then it goes into the Holy Grail. Anybody have any comments or research on this? How did it happen that they ended up have God appear and have the Holy Grail? Did anybody have any comments on that? Because they could have just gone straight down the King Arthur path. Ted, you're muted.
Well, the King Arthur path is the Holy Grail. I mean, that's they needed to get the Holy Grail to make the whole round table work. And that's it's like in the movie, they all go off to different places to find this thing, and they don't succeed. And then that's why the round table, I mean, this is in the legend, of course, fell apart. I mean, you got Parsifal, which is Wagner doing the same kind of thing. What gets me about the god is that he's some swami, some Indian swami, and you know, and while Zeke says it has it really isn't that sacrilegious, because it doesn't really bring in the Jesus stuff. There, I'm being a little sacrilegious. You know, the whole idea of the Holy Grail and being you know, the sword and all that stuff, that isn't even brought up in the movie. So it's just sort of this trope of like you say, it was what the King Arthur and his guys were out going, was to find, you know, the pure soul was going to find the Holy Grail. And as we find out, the movie just ends. They don't even get close to finding the thing.
So we do have another question out here, and that is, what is the symbolism of the emblems on the Knights of the Round Table shields? Zeke, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think the one that I first caught, and I think is the most obvious, would be Sir Robin's shield. At first, I thought, oh, it's a robin with his name, but no, it's the chicken, because he is the most coward-like of the entire group. He's not quite as brave as Sir Lancelot. So I think that the chicken was pretty spot on. But I did a little bit of research, and I found that Sir Lancelot has the dragon emblem on his, and just in lots of the myth, he was known to slay dragons. And it's also a show of his ferocity throughout the movie. He's definitely the most dangerous, I'd say. Sir Galahad has his red cross over the pure white background. It really, his whole scene with the Castle of the Maidens, I think he's probably the most pure of soul, most devout to God in all of it, at least compared to his compatriots here. I really don't know much about it, but King Arthur's sunshine that he's got on his chest also has a fantastic mustache. I tried to find any meaning with that one, but I couldn't. I think that they just thought it was funny, and I really think it's funny too. But the rest of them, I really wasn't able to find anything super meaningful or really that I thought was really purposeful for this film.
Rita, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I found a lot of the same information that Zeke did, and so for King Arthur, the sun on the shield represents the vision of God, because he was given the task of the quest. Sir Bedivere, his shield has a tree on it because he's a man of science and nature. And when I was thinking about the film, I didn't necessarily think about him as being a science or nature guy, but that's how he was depicted. And Sir Bors has no symbol on his shield because he has no shield. He got left out.
Yeah, and Sir Bors was also played by the gentleman, one of the directors, Terry Gilliam, that played actually Patsy. So he was the guy clicking the coconuts a lot of time, but he also has a double as this other knight who dies eventually. So, right. Anything else? What was the purpose of using animation intermittently throughout the film? Rita or Zeke, do you want, or Ted? Who wants to start on that one? Ted?
That's just that's what Monty Python does. I mean, in their television show, they'd interrupt things with the animation and the goofy things like that. And I think Terry Gilliam is the one who was the animator. That was his great skill, and he went on to be a somewhat serious filmmaker. But he was the most visual of them all.
Yeah, Terry Gilliam was the animator and the director for the film. Went on to make several different films after this, and there he is. He's pictured right here, and I also have another slide of him. I thought there he is right here. It's a bit. I like this picture here. But anyways, going back, did anybody else have a comment on this topic?
Well, for the animation and everything, I think that it really allows for, like, I mean, especially in the case of the monster, like CGI, but not really CGI. You can do the big out of this world things with that animation and have your characters interact with it. And I personally liked that it is so different from real life. They didn't try to do any sort of computer generated stuff with their budget, that the animation allowed them to fight the monster and really have a great way of defeating it. And just all the transitions in between, all the different Knights of the Round Table as they went on their own separate journeys, having a little introduction of what they've been up to, or, I mean, something unrelated, but the little animated pieces are just kind of filler. I mean, not filler, as Ted said, it's part of Monty Python's whole shtick, but it really also connected the religious aspect of it. They kind of had this stained glass, like old Christian art style to it that I think really brought everything together with the book of the movie, Christian God given quest and everything. So I really liked the animation. I think that it really wrapped everything together really well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a comment here. Another comment from Marilee is that she liked Zeke's take on the film that he did before the session about he was a kid and his friends did the words "knee." Did I say it right? "Knee." After having seen the film. Zeke, can you tell us a little more about that scene and what you thought was interesting with that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I was about 13, 14 when I watched it. And I'm sure that it was a bit of confusion and annoyance for my teachers and some people that may not have fully understood what we were doing or haven't seen the movie or seen it in a while, at least, to really get it. But it was just something where you'd see your buddy walking down the hall and you'd like shout it at him, and it'd be really fun to overreact, go, "No, please stop," like the old lady did. And occasionally someone else that would get it would say the next line of, "Oh, it's a shame that in this day and age, two grown men can yell knee at an old woman." And like, it's just really being able to enjoy the movie and letting it go on past the 2 hours that you watched it, I think really is a sign of a good movie. And I had a lot of fun with it.
Rita?
Yeah, I just like to add, and I agree with Zeke, that's a sign of a good movie when something sticks with you. As a retired third grade teacher, I know that students would come in after the weekend of a new movie release and they'd repeat lines, even at third grade. And it forced me to watch more children's films at that time, so I would understand what they were talking about. And then, because they would just spout random words or random characters' names, and it really helped me to understand what they had seen and what they meant. And exactly, it's just a word or a phrase, and it stuck with them, and they enjoyed it, and it showed that it stuck with them longer by repeating these little phrases.
Okay. And I would just Ted, did you have anything more to say on that? Because I also point out there's some phrases in here like "run away, run away, run away," and that whole thing has stayed for so long. I remember when Jimmy Carter was president, and there was a rabbit that was coming out of the woods or something like this, and the security with him didn't know what it was all about, and there was a commotion about taking him and whisking him away for someplace real quick, and they found out late it was just the rabbit. And so that just made it even bigger, this whole concept of run away, so more relevant. But is there any other lines in the movie that you can remember from the movie that's carried through time? Rita?
Yes. Well, Larry and I went to see Spamalot, which is a musical based on this film, which we can talk a little bit more about later. And one of the catchphrases that stayed with us after we left the theater was, "I'm not dead yet." And that one just kept, coming over and over again. Yes, that and Runaway.
And I actually got a button afterwards that I wore into meetings, a little small button. So sometimes it just would let people know how I feel. I'm not dead yet. It said, I'm not dead yet. They barely liked that film. So it was just like a little comment, because some of these meetings were just kind of too much. And I was like, no, but I'm still here. I just want to let everybody know I'm still here. All right. All right. Another question here is, what are some of the examples of the MP team or Monty Python team keeping on budget for making the film? Zeke, do you want to start that one then?
Yeah, the obvious one is the coconuts. We talked about that earlier, and I love their ability to turn lack of budget into a joke in its own. But a couple other ones, all the armor is, other than King Arthur's chainmail around his head, is all wool and cloth that's been painted to look like chainmail or armor along those lines. As well as they only used 2 castles for this movie. They all the interiors and exteriors were just the same too. And I mean, a castle is a castle on the inside, but you got to respect their ability to work with just 2 locations. And then I mean, the animation, I think it's not the most complex. It's not really the most fluid, but I think that once again, it plays its part perfectly. And my absolute favorite, and I don't know if it's actually true, but I like to imagine that they may have had something else planned for the ending and realized they ran out of money and need to have everything just get ended right where it is. So I don't know if that's completely true. I'm sure that they had planned an actual ending like that and shot it normally, but I like to think that there was a big battle between the French and English planned and they just didn't have the funds. But those were all the ones that I caught, if you guys have any more.
Yeah, I have a few more. I agree with all the ones that you mentioned, Zeke. I found that out too. And I think reusing the actors over and over again, which of course is a Monty Python staple, but the fact that you have the same 6 actors appearing in every skit over and over and over again gives you the idea that there is a low budget involved. And from what I read, a lot of the extras were actually technical crew, family members. In the final battle scene that was to be but never was, a group of students was recruited to stand in as the army. So I think they used a lot of different ways to save money. But I do agree that the coconuts was the best one.
Ted?
I watched this on the DVD, and they had a little feature where this rabbit would appear with a pound sign, a pound for money. And whenever this rabbit would appear, you could click on it, and it would show you some of the bills that they had to pay for the film. So they kind of made a running joke in this DVD that I mean, I think that's part of what they were after this whole thing. We're out there making a movie, and we're going to do it on the cheap, and we don't really care, I love that line where he says, "Oh, look at you want to go to the castle?" I said, "That's not a castle. That's just a model up there, So it's the whole idea of why we haven't talked about this, but it's a takeoff on all the Hollywood sword movies that they made, and they might have skimped on the costumes, but they got this great score of it's just kind of a pastiche of all the big Hollywood movie things, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of of what they're doing on the screen. It's this great contradiction there. I really enjoyed that part of it too. And I have to say, when it did fall off at the very end, and this I don't know if it's in the real movie, but on the DVD, that there's this really nonsensical piece that goes on and on and on and on. And it's really a really neat, clever little piece of somebody playing the same thing over and over on the organ. I enjoyed that too. Anyway.
Marilee, thank you very much for your comments today and questions. So what do you think the meaning of the modern police car had to the action of the movie? Who would like, Zeke, let's start you with that one, the police car and this whole element.
Well, one of the things about this movie is I at least haven't been able to really pin down when this is. I mean, the movie starts off with 952 AD, but I mean, with all the police cars and everything going on at the end, you really don't know. Like, it's just both of them. Either every character that's playing a medieval character is a complete loony who is just fully engrossed in this, or that the Monty Python crew just had an idea of kind of mixing the two and just ran with it. And I personally believe they don't need to explain themselves. And I think that the police kind of make an interesting antagonist. You really, if you were telling someone it's the story of King Arthur searching for the Holy Grail with his Knights of the Round Table, and at the very end they all get arrested. Like, I think that if you told someone that and they had no idea, then they would have no idea what this movie is. And it's, once again, very different. I don't think the police car really has any philosophical meaning or anything. I think that it's just a tool in the big joke of the movie.
Rita?
Yes, it is an interesting element of the film because it takes you so by surprise. First of all, why the police have to be called in, because the professor was murdered, as I think it was Prince Lancelot was, or Sir Lancelot was riding by, and he was not careful with his sword, and suddenly this man is dead. And throughout the film, you see the little scenes that where this incident that seemed so random is suddenly building and taking on meaning. I mean, the wife discovers him in the garden, the police are called, the detective comes in, and then at the very end, the police show up to arrest King Arthur and Sir Lancelot. And when I was thinking about the film, I was like, why is that in there? And I know one story was, well, they needed to end it because they didn't have the budget to do the big storm the castle scene. So let's just end it with this weird thing we put in there just for fun anyway, and have them arrested. Or I thought, well, is this a film? Are we watching a film about making the film about the Holy Grail, the quest of the Holy Grail? And the police at the end just bring us back to the present day, just like you were mentioning, Zeke. When does it take place? Is it really taking place in the Middle Ages, or are we watching people reenacting the story and they have their consequences for their behavior in the end?
Mm-hmm. Ted, do you have any more on that at all? You did, Ted. Can't.
Wrong part of this.
That's all right.
Well, anyway, I think it's more this deconstruction of a film. You know, I mean, when the professor shows up, it's something like a BBC documentary commenting on the times, and then it just he gets caught up in this thing, and the movie that you're watching is in the documentary, and it gets all and it's really, I don't think the word clever is. I just think that's part of what they're doing here. I mean, it's partly a bunch of guys running out and making a movie, but they're also making a joke about, old King Arthur movies, but they're also talking about, when people make their own movies all by themselves, they're not following the rules. And then they actually killed somebody and they're being taken seriously that way. And then I tell you that, I mean, when it ends that way, it just throws you completely. You keep waiting and waiting for it to come back, and that's it. And that's very. I found that very appealing to me. I like that, and there wasn't any explanation. It was just that's the end.
So, just a conclusion of this topic is that they originally started writing this, Gilliam and the two directors, Terry Gilliam and Terry Jones, the two Terrys. They actually, their concept was to have it start out in the King Arthur's time, and then go back and forth between time and end up finding the Holy Grail in like Harrods or some other store in England, like in the men's department. So that was originally the storyline what they had. And they ended up, there was more about the Holy Grail, and there was some discussion about it. And they felt, well, we just need to go and spend more time in King Arthur's time, because I think it was Terry Gilliam that wrote some books on actually this time period and was very interested in this time period. They wanted to do some more talking about it. But at the end, like Rita was saying, they ran out of money. They didn't have enough money to finish the film. They had all the actors in the background are all just students from colleges, extras, all these extras as warriors. And to make it look like a lot of people, they kept taking shots at different angles and just capturing that to make it look like it's a big crowd. But that was the ending of the movie, and just ending that way. But I also want to say something too, is like taking a chance. You can see in this picture, I can't point to it on screen, but if you see where I think it's is that Lancelot? Galahad is being frisked on the police car. If you see the guy's touching his chainmail, but if you go above it, you see some skin there. Now, I'm just going to let you know, as I was an actor and I did some Shakespeare and some other stuff, and I've actually worn chainmail, and it was like putting on long underwear. Okay, actually a full suit it's a full suit. You wouldn't see skin there. So that hat, I saw that when I saw that picture, I said, I knew those weren't real. So anyways, but the whole movie was made on the cheap and everything else, and they ended it that way. So
and I do want to say, before we leave the topic of the ending and everything, I do love how it is considered the biggest cop-out in cinema history in the most figurative way possible.
Yes. All right. So we have another question waiting for us.
I want to say one more thing. I mean,
one more thing.
All those jokes with arms getting cut off and blood splurting, and then this one was like, uh-oh, somebody really got killed, you know. So
yeah. And there would be police today. There, King Arthur's Day, they just did what they wanted to do. So, all right, let's go on to the next question here. What was the audience reaction to the confusion of the opening of the film being shown in air? Dentist on the Job, which was an actual film. Ted, why don't you talk about this one, because you had some experience with this.
Well, again, I don't know if it happened in the theaters or not this way, but it starts off with this certificate of the British censors and all that, and then it starts open with this movie and Dennis on the Job, and then they say, "Oops, we got the wrong reel here." And I talked about this a little before, but you know, this is the kind of experience you wouldn't have these days. As Zeke would know, you can't mix up the reels in a digital movie, that kind of thing. And I guess it's partly, I don't know the movie itself, but there were a lot of awful British comedies, and some of them, there's some rather great British comedies too. But I think this also kind of puts Monty Python saying, well, this is what we came out of, these screwball English comedies from the 50s. So, and again, I don't know if it was shown in the theaters this way or not.
So what it was is that the DVD, the special DVD, it came out years later. That was included. They instead of having the traditional opening, they actually added this trailer opening, or not the trailer, the opening of the Dentist on the Job, and then had it act like there's a projectionist up in the booth, right, Zeke, with the film and the rolling and everything and breaking. Now, Zeke is too young. He doesn't know that as a projectionist because he only knows digital. So, but that could happen. That would happen. They'd have to go and splice it together and get it going again. And you'd hear somebody mumbling in the back usually about it. So, any other thoughts on this, Rita? Yeah, Ted?
Before you take it down, notice that Shirley Eaton is one in the cast, and she was one of the Bond girls.
Yeah, she was a Bond girl. Yes.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay. Do we have any more questions out there right now? Okay. Did the actors themselves have any favorite skits in the film at all? Rita?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. So the story starts together with King Arthur looking for his knights to create the round table and go on this quest. But then they decide to split up to look for the Grail, and each of the knights has their own storyline. And so each of those actors actually wrote the skits that they performed as their characters. So each has their own perspective on it. And I found out that John Cleese, in an interview later about this film, indicated that one of his favorite skits was, let me find my notes here, the one with the guards that are supposed to guard Prince Herbert before his wedding. And John Cleese said he liked that one the best because it was the tightest shot. It was not a lot of physical humor, not as physical as many others. I mean, there are the knights moving or the guards moving back and forth, but just the banter back and forth. And it was a very tight shot using only 2 cameras. And he really liked that one because of the way it was filmed and the sheer silliness. And if you ever read through the actual dialogue of that scene, it is just chaos back and forth because no guard ever understands the symbol direction correctly each time, you know? So it's so applicable to many situations that we find ourselves in when you explain something to someone and they just don't understand what you're saying. So I think that one works on another level that many people can relate to it, it's giving directions and not being understood clearly.
So on that topic of that one scene, there's also in there where the king is trying to talk to his son. And what is he doing in that scene? How does that relate? And how does it relate to future movies, Rita?
Okay, I'll take that one because I know where you're leading with this because Larry and I had this conversation. So every time Prince Herbert wants to say something about his situation, he wants to sing about it, but his father doesn't want to let him. He always wants to stop him. And a week or two ago, Larry and I decided we needed something uplifting, so we watched all the Austin Powers films. And we know that Mike Myers was also influenced by British humor. And if you notice Dr. Evil in each of the films, when he has a conversation or his son Scott tries to have a conversation, always tries to, he never lets him talk. And when we reviewed this movie, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, we saw that same thing happening with the king of the swampland trying to stop his son, Prince Herbert, from singing his feelings and emotions. And so I think that just gives another nod to Monty Python and their troupe and how future filmmakers look to them in their future filmmaking.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else, Zeke or Ted, did the actors themselves have any favorite skits in the film or anything?
I'm not sure about if it's a favorite, but I just, in my research, did come across the skit with the 2 guards discussing the coconut and everything was actually what inspired pretty much the rest of the movie. The 2 of them were talking and coming up with what they want to do next, and the just 2 idea of King Arthur trying to, get in, talk with the Lord and everything, but they're just so engrossed in this argument about whether a swallow could carry a coconut that kind of led on to the rest of the movie being written. That's what they decided, that it was going to be medieval. And I don't know if it's a favorite, but I think it's definitely very noteworthy. And the whole scene that Rita's talking about, I just want to say probably the hardest I laughed in the entire movie was Sir Lancelot charging the 2 guards at the gate, and he's off in the distance, just slowly getting closer and closer. And then suddenly he's right on top of the guards. It caught me so by surprise that I was like belly laughing I was watching this last night and it got me laughing again. So very special.
Ted, any further comments on this question?
Well, I can't answer. If I have more, when I have an afternoon where I have nothing to do, I can watch this movie with the soundtrack cut off and the guys talking about making the movie. Actually, they have 2 separate soundtracks that way.
Oh,
But the way we're talking about those guards, that's like the Abbott and Costello, who's on first. I mean, it's that same kind of verbal misunderstanding, And while I'm talking, on the DVD they have subtitles of Shakespeare. Somebody modeled actual quotes from Henry IV, and when you're listening, down at the bottom, the dialogue on the screen is what you see in the movie, but down in the subtitles, it's all these little snippets from Shakespeare, and they kind of modeled these pieces of Shakespeare to kind of fit what the people were saying on the screen. It's really pretty brilliant. Somebody really did a lot of good work to do that, but Again, that's something for a Sunday afternoon when it's raining hard or snowing to watch that whole thing.
Or you're in quarantine.
Yes.
All right. So on to another question here. How is this movie? And thank you very much, Wai Fang, for putting together all these questions for us and collecting them and putting them on the screen and keeping us all in order here. So thank you very much. How is this movie related to the stage musical Spamalot? Where does the title Spamalot come from? Let's see here. Rita, would you start with this one? Since you've seen Spamalot?
Yes, I've seen Spamalot, and it was fun. And I think I actually saw Spamalot before I saw the Monty Python film, or maybe getting tickets to go see Spamalot encouraged me to watch the film. So the Spamalot Spamalot was inspired by the movie Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And if you remember the scene in the banquet hall where all the knights are singing and dancing, they're dancing on the tables and they're doing their little kick line. And one of the lyrics from the song, in which many lines rhyme with Camelot, the line is, "We eat ham and jam and spam a lot." And so that's where the title for Spamalot comes from. Yes, and many of the especially, I mean, that's what stuck in my head. The "I'm not dead yet" scene. That's one of the first scenes in the musical as well. Although the musical does incorporate some other songs, like "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life" from The Life of Brian. So they did a good job of combining ideas from the films, but sticking mainly to the Holy Grail theme.
Mm-hmm. Zeke or Ted, any other comments on Spamalot?
I mean, I haven't really had the opportunity to watch it yet, but I'm not much of a musical, like I haven't really watched a lot of them, but the ones I have, I've very much enjoyed. So I think that I definitely know which musical I'm going to watch next.
Mm-hmm.
And I never knew they had Spam in England. I thought that was a delicacy only we in America enjoy.
Yeah, but isn't it true during World War II, the rest of the world found Spam? Especially in Hawaii, they use it all the time. It's part of their culture, is eating Spam. So, because the soldiers and the armed forces brought it over there. All right. Do we have, okay. We've kind of talked about this before, but at the end of the film, are we watching a film about making a film about King Arthur? Do you guys want to talk about that one more? No? Okay.
All right. We've pretty much covered our bases with this one.
Okay, so here's another question from Marilee. Thank you very much, Marilee. Do you think it was a message about politics too? The message from God, I think she's referring to. Zeke?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some politics in this movie. It's not really, it doesn't lean into it very hard at all, other than really the whole scene with Dennis and them talking about the very complex form of government that that small area has. But if there was any message about politics, it was dictatorships are something that most of the hardworking class of the, some of us people out here gathering filth, might not be so happy about a king. But I think that King Arthur tries to do a pretty good job of being king. I mean, his duties are mostly trying to keep God happy by finding the Grail and all that. But I think that this is something that is mostly politics free, and they're really not trying to send a message of either way with this film.
But I would say this: if they're parodying, is that a word? All the the medieval movies of Hollywood. I mean, the peasants are just like what they were doing in the movie here. That originally they said, "Which way is Camelot?" or "Which way is the castle?" And the peasant would point their finger. That's the way it would be in the Hollywood versions of these things. And in this one, it's the peasant talks back to them and has an point. I'm not a woman. And what do you mean? I'm old. I'm 37, and my name's Dennis. I'm not a man. And that kind of has to do with the way Hollywood treats the lower classes or the working classes. And I think there's a point there that that's something that's missing from most Hollywood, just about all Hollywood films. They're interested in all the fancy stuff. There's no women in this, by the way. I mean, there's that one seductive scene, but there are no women characters really, and that's kind of interesting, I thought.
Okay, so let's talk about that. That's a good question to talk about. Our discussion topic right now is talk about the women in the scene. There were women in that, and there were predominantly, the most scene was the one where you have Sir Galahad sees the Holy Grail, and he goes into the castle, and it was a secret order of, I can't remember the name of it. I think Rita knows the name of it again. But these women are in here. And this woman that's the leader of this person right here, I'm pointing with my mouse so nobody can see it. This leader in here, she was a regular on the Monty Python show and also appeared in all her movies. Okay. But what do you think? Let's go talk about this sequence itself. This was one of the nights. So Galahad goes off and ends up doing his own little skit. So any take on this? Anybody want to start talking about this take and what you thought about it? Zeke?
Well, each of the nights when they...
Oops. I hit Zeke. Sorry, Zeke.
That's all right.
It's all right. Okay.
Each of the nights after they separate, go off and face their own challenges. And I think that they're all, they're tests of God for each of them. I think that's pretty clear. Like when Sir Lancelot goes out, he has to, he finds the prince up in his castle and everything, but he, it slaughters a lot of wedding goers on the way and everything. And I think that, I don't really know if he learned a lesson, but he did definitely go out and be himself and, be challenged in his own ways. And I think this scene with Sir Galahad is equivalent. He very much seems to be struggling with his chastity and everything with this whole scene. And he's definitely being tempted by the army of women in this castle. And it isn't until he's rescued that he was able to actually get out. So I don't think that really any of them learned a lesson, because even at the end of it, Sir Galahad wants to stay. And as I mentioned with Sir Lancelot, he kept on murdering wedding goers, even pretty much on his way out. So I think that all these scenes are really to show our characters being tested and usually failing that test, which I think is just a joke in its own.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else wants to join in that? Ted?
Yeah. The opera Parsifal is about getting the Holy Grail, and in the second act of Parsifal goes to the castle to some. Well, anyway, there's this whole scene where he's tempted by these flower maidens. So this is sort of a parody on that. And we were talking about what the Holy Grail and King Arthur and all that. They really left out the whole Guinevere. I guess that's a little too serious, but Lancelot being in love with Guinevere, the queen, but anyway, that's the big in the legend. That's the big part for the woman was Queen Guinevere, and in this movie, it's just all this, I don't know, sophomoric humor, which is very funny, but there's no female leads at all except for this one scene where they're just sort of sex crazed, between 16 and 19 and a half. Come on now.
And I did want to say there is the woman character is the witch, which actually turns out to weigh as much as a duck and presumably actually was a witch, despite the entire town dressing her up like it. And we're meant to believe that they're just trying to burn her because they don't like her for some reason or another. But at the end, we find out she did weigh as much as a duck and presumably is a witch. So as the only other female character, it is interesting how they're either witches or temptresses trying to lure our characters away from the main goal.
Okay, Rita?
Yes, I just had an aha moment. So earlier I said the emblem on Sir Bedivere's shield was the tree because he's a man of science. So here's the scene that shows his scientific thinking, going through the process of the, setting a hypothesis and looking for the facts and ergo, therefore, if she weighs as much as a duck, she must be a witch. So there you go. And we found the science connection for Sir Bedivere.
And he did have some very large scales just ready for this too. So he must have been doing some other scientific experiments.
Yeah,
Or
so they just happen to have large scales in the village courtyard to weigh witches when they happen to appear.
Yes, so women weren't really large in this film at all, but again, with the Monty Python troupe itself, there wasn't any, it was all 6 men that were associated with it, but there was one person that was considered, and she was the head of the, Rita, what was the name of that society that Sir Galahad bumped into?
I mean, I know it's the Castle Anthrax, but I don't remember the name of the group at all, no. But it is the Castle Anthrax, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Larry, and you found out something interesting about Carol Cleveland. Can you share that with us?
Yes, Carol Cleveland actually was a regular actor on almost all the shows. I mentioned this earlier. She was on the show, and she appeared in all the Monty Python movies. She did almost something like 2/3 or 3/4 of the regular television shows, and became a regular cast and crew. One of the directors recently died, and they got together again. And she's included with almost every time the troupe gets together, and she's often called the 7th Python, because she was such a contributor and such a force behind it. But I thought she did a really good job playing 2 roles in this. And Rita, what were the name of the 2? It was the 2 ladies.
One of them was Zoot, and the other one begins with a D. But I don't think it was Zoot and Doot, but something like that. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I thought that was just pretty funny. So that's the last question. We got about 4 minutes left, so we have some time here. Was this the first film for the directors? And what do they do later after this film? Zeke, why don't you start with this one?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I do believe this was their first film. They had Monty Python and the Flying Circus beforehand, but I do believe that it wasn't until after Monty Python did they do Life of Brian and The Meaning of Life. I know that they wanted to do something that actually had a bit more of an overarching story than the Flying Circus's skits and everything. And I've read some interviews. This wasn't their favorite. I think they liked Life of Brian a little bit better, but they liked it because you can really tell the transition where the first half is a lot of skits, a lot of the, like the coconuts and the Black Knight scene and the Bridge of Death scene. Those could all be a little clip in a short story. But as the movie goes on, we get into the second half. It gets a lot more plot, and I mean, I don't want to say a lot more, but it's less skit related, a little more story and wrapping everything up related.
Ted, do you want to talk more about the directors at all?
Well, there you have it. Terry Gilliam went on to do a bunch of films. What was the one that about the time travel and all that?
Time Bandits.
No, not Time Bandits. There was another one that was a serious. Well, he did a couple of other.
Yes, that was a recent film.
Films too. And what's kind of ironic, he tried to make Don Quixote into a movie, and he would there was like rainstorms that would bust the sets up. So he kind of relived what happened with the Holy Grail with Don Quixote. He never got it finished. I think he made a movie about the making of the movie, something like that.
Rita?
12 Monkeys, that was the one. 12 Monkeys.
12 Monkeys, yes.
Was the name of that film.
Well, when I looked into what the Monty Python group did after these 3 films, they each went on to do a lot more in the film and entertainment industry. I mean, Terry Gilliam that we just talked about did a lot of directing, and he continued to write and animate. Terry Jones went on to direct films and write and act. Graham Chapman, who was King Arthur, he was a writer and contributed both in television and in film. John Cleese, I know is the most familiar to me as a writer, actor, and producer. And the other person I always remembered was Michael Palin, because I remember watching the PBS travel shows that were a part of the BBC originally and then shown on PBS. He did a lot of travel shows, which were very interesting and very thoughtful and introspective, not slapstick humor as he had done in the Monty Python group. And Eric Idle, I found out, also did a lot of musical work and worked on a lot of soundtracks for films and television as well. So they each continued to work in the entertainment industry, following their individual talents as well.
Mm-hmm. And Terry Jones, one of the two directors, passed away just in January this year. And they had a big reunion and cast and everything about getting together for that. So we're kind of wrapping it up here. That was the last question. We're coming down to the last minutes. We thank you very much for who are here today. And also we appreciate those who watch this. We do know people watch this afterwards when it's a recorded video. So we do appreciate that. And we thank you very much for supporting us. Remember, we are a nonprofit and we are collecting donations all the time, and that's how we do it. And all of us here are volunteers for doing this. And next week we have another film coming up, and Ted Kroll is going to be our lead on this. This is Anatomy of the Mover. Excuse me, not Anatomy of the Movie. That's what we do. Anatomy of a Murder. And that's going to be, Ted already has an introduction out there online, or they'll be available all on our website and information for it. And we'll have the live stream here next week, 7:30, same time, same place. We'll again have that for Anatomy of the Murder. But I want to say thank you very much to our volunteers again. I want to say thank you to Rita for doing this and taking her time to be with us. Same to you, Ted. Your experience is just phenomenal. And Zeke, you bring so much energy. It is so good to see you and hear you, what you'd like to discover about films and everything else. So thank you all three for being here. Thank you, everybody out there. We'll see you again. And also, White Fang, thank you very much for all you did in the background. Goodbye and good night and good luck.